Welcome back to Up the Villa podcast and welcome to the international break. Now, we've got something a little bit different lined up for you on this episode, and it's all about Hannah and how she grew into a love of Aston Villa. I did my episode I'm going to say about a year ago, how I fell in love with Aston Villa, how I supported Villa, what they mean to me. And now I feel like it's Hannah's time for you guys at home anyway, to have an understanding of how we all met and her memories, etc., growing up. So we'll get straight on in there then. So what are your earliest memories of supporting Aston Villa?
I was just saying before we came on air that this is quite nerve-wracking because it's different having to talk about yourself rather than Villa. But we're all here for the same reason, and that is a love of Villa. And you've used a word there or a phrase there of me growing into being a Villa fan, which I definitely feel like I have. So I do have early memories of being a Villa fan. Um, my very, very earliest memories of being a Villa fan were going to some of my first games, and I can't remember where we sat. I think we were either in like the upper north stand maybe. Um, and I was terrified because we were really high up and it was such a new experience. And was trying to get to grips with being in this really loud, bit leery environment. But the main thing I remember was, oh, I'm really high up. And then after that, my dad was taking me and my brother to games. So my brother, obviously, it's quite typical being a boy, was really into football. And dad was trying to like encourage me along to it. I was a little girl, so there was bits of me that was interested and then bits of me that weren't. So it was a bit kind of gradual for me. I went to a few games, but definitely, I think I've wrote about this on the website before, kind of got to secondary school age, so 12, 13 in the UK. And it was that time that, for all my young girl viewers that are watching or women viewers that are watching, you may know that feeling of sort of hitting that age and everything immediately is like really embarrassing. You don't feel like as a young girl that football is a very welcoming sport. And you kind of, even in PE, you're getting shoved into netball or playing badminton. And that was fine, but I was always a bit like, well, why can't we go and play football? So it's all this kind of culture of growing up and not feeling like football was a girl's thing and wanting to fit in and not wanting to, look like, oh, Hannah's a bit like a boy because she wants to play football or she likes football. So it's a really weird thing, and that kind of gets ingrained in you as a young woman. And it wasn't until I'd say my latter years at college or when I started at university, so 6, 7 years ago, that I started to kind of look at my dad and my brother going to games still and think, I feel left out. I want to go to games. And I think at the start, it was probably because I was a bit jealous that my brother was doing something that I wasn't. And then it developed into, well, I'm still quite interested. Like, I never lost that Villa was my team. Like, you don't lose it, do you? No matter what. If you're born into Villa, you die Villa. Like, my dad is like the biggest Villa fan. He'd gone to Villa games since he was literally able to walk. So, it was never that I'd lost that. It was more just, it was just a cultural thing. And then starting to grow into myself, I was finding myself again, thinking about the things I enjoyed. And I started to find that Villa was something I was interested in. I was keeping an eye more on the games and the results, and was thinking, this is something I want to be part of again. So then we kind of get to the next wave of where I really think I found myself falling back in love with football.
I think that's the thing with football as well, and as a fan, you tend to go on a bit of a journey, don't you? Sort of, it's ingrained in your DNA. That is your club. As soon as you wear a shirt, there's no going back. That's my view anyway. And I think during life, probably supporting a team probably has peaks and troughs of just wherever you are in life. Do you know what I mean? So you're saying, at early school and then, more towards the end of college. So it's sort of dipped and then it's gone up again and the interest has risen. But you've always sort of been a fan. And I think a lot of fans can probably gauge that. And I think, when sort of fans look at, going to games and I always see people commenting saying like, I don't go to the games, but, being part of this channel makes me feel like I'm still a part of it. And for me, I don't see how someone can be a better fan than somebody just because they go to games. I think it doesn't matter whether you go or you don't go. It has no relevance whatsoever. It's just some people are fortunate to go. You might sort of have a better job that you don't have to work weekends. So it all works. There's so many different permutations to being a football fan. So I'm going to estimate that your best times as a fan that you could probably remember would be Martin O'Neill days. Or are you too young for Martin O'Neill?
Those were some of my first games. So I think I've said before, like my first Villa idol was John Carew. I literally adore John Carew, mostly because of the song. And I think it's another thing of like Villa fans who have young kids or are going as families. A lot of the time, a lot of the songs have got swear words in, which now I love to take part in. But as a child, there was only like a few songs that we could sing along to, and I loved the John Carew song. He's bigger than me and you. It was just very fun for me to sing along, and I fell in love with John Carew. And it was that era sort of 07, 08. I've got a photo here. I'm going to block out my brother because for privacy reasons. But this is me in my, I think, 07, 08 shirt, which was probably one of my first shirts. Definitely one of the first that I remember wearing. So it was a nice year to be a Villa fan. But I was a kid and I didn't understand the glamour of football yet. I wouldn't have understood European qualification, but we had a great season that year. So at that age, you're thinking, this football stuff's great, isn't it? And then obviously the years that followed, we gradually got worse and worse. But getting caught up in that time was probably a good time to sort of capture my attention, really.
I mean, I'm gonna try and estimate as well that drop off that you had where you weren't as interested might be around Paul Lambert times and that era. So I can understand why there may have been a little bit of
Fickle,
a drop off there.
fickle,
Yeah.
yeah.
So my next sort of point is like you spoke about like being at school and stuff and not sort of having like being able to play football. How do you think being a woman supporting Villa has sort of changed recently? Because I think there's been, a massive shift in the way that women are perceived to play football, the way in which now women are fully on the media. You're on our channel and you're absolutely fantastic. Your views are absolutely spot on. So how do you feel that there has been that shift?
There definitely has been. I think just one point that you made not too long ago about no fan is better than another fan because of XYZ reasons, I think it is an important factor to bring into this conversation because when I was starting to kind of fall back in love with football or fall into love with football, there was a lot of guilt that I didn't deserve to, call myself a proper fan, whatever that means, because there was years where I didn't follow Villa or because I didn't know all the trivia and I didn't know all the players or all the managers. And there was all that guilt. And I feel like, again, it's all these things that become a barrier, specifically, I think, to young women into getting into football, particularly the men's game. But the shift was huge, and for me, it was going to university. So I did my degree in English and journalism. I knew I wanted to write. I knew I was passionate about journalism. And the more I spent my time studying that, the more I kind of fell into sports media. I was starting to build up my own network, trying to connect with other journalists my age, and really looking up to some of the women in the media that were doing sort of football commentary and things like that. And even then, this was 2018, I started my degree. There was never anywhere near the amount that there is now, just, a handful of years later. But it was that representation to me that inspired me. And I just thought, oh my God, one day I really want that to be me. I want that to be my job. That is so cool. Look at the respect. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't still a ton of people in comment sections or probably in pubs that would roll their eyes when there was a woman commentating on the football. It's easy to not acknowledge that when you're a man, but as a young woman who wants to be in the world of football, you do pick up on these things where it's like you don't feel like it's your place still. But the last few years have been so important. I think a lot of it has been helped by the growth of the women's game, by the representation that we're seeing on screen, the success of the Lionesses. All of these things are just building, and being a catalyst to this being a place where I feel comfortable. And even at Villa Park, there is so many women and kids there now. Like the dynamic at Villa Park is so different to what I remember as a child, where it was very male dominated. And that was the culture. And, that's what it always has been and probably always will be for the most part. But my mum went to a game at the start of the year when I couldn't go. She took my ticket and she was really surprised by how different it had been. And it'd been like 20 years since she'd been to a football game. And to be around sort of other fans that were in a really nice family dynamic, men taking their younger daughters, like it's all playing a part and it's so important. It sounds so silly when we talk about these things, but genuinely it makes such a difference. And I think if I had the same media that I consume now when I was 12 or 13, my Villa journey would be so different. And that's not to be like a sub story, it's what it is. But I think it's so nice now that young girls going into school or looking into their career can like see it as a viable option and know that they can go to games. Like there are so many more chances to get involved in football now, whether you want to play or whether you want to watch. It's come a long way and it's really nice to see.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. But along with that has to come a sense of understanding and education on the game and knowledge, because we know we know sort of certain pundits are absolutely useless. I mean, male, female, there's just ones that you listen to and you're just like, what are you on about? Like you
Yeah.
don't understand the game. You don't like inspire me when you're talking. So like I've mentioned earlier, when you come on our channel, majority of people will always say Hannah's thoughts are really, really good, very, very knowledgeable. So where does your reading of the game sort of come from? Where do you think you've developed that from? Because it is a skill to be able to read a game. It is a skill to be able to watch something and then portray a story through your own thoughts. So has that come from sort of like your education and being able to write, or do you think it's come from just watching a lot of football?
Honestly, it's a mix of so many things. To start off with, I like to think that so much of it has come from my dad, and God, I could get a bit emotional here. But the bit from my dad and going to games with dad and just absorbing his knowledge over all these years is that it was positive. Like, and this channel, we know we're for the most part really positive and just love Villa. And that was the thing we always had, was that my dad would always try and see the positive, and all of our, chats during the game, after the game, before the game, all of it was grounded in, right, best for the team. So that played a big part in sort of how I formed my perspective. Then a lot of it has come from just watching football more and more, not just Villa games, other games, Championship, so much consumption of content. Watching other content creators, like before I got involved in this channel, I was watching all the Villa channels, like just consuming it all, learning. Because again, when I came back into this kind of footballing sphere, I was so fresh and raw that, I knew the rules of football, but like you say, having a grasp on it and being able to commentate and analyze it is a whole different skill. But then thirdly, I'd just say that, yeah, it probably just has come a lot from my education and the way that my brain is has just formulated in sort of like the media world, bit like being a sort of journalist, so to speak, writing a lot. That's where I started. Most people probably don't remember, but back in December 2020, in fact, it was the Wolves away game where Al Ghazi scored the last minute penalty. That was my first ever match report, I think. Ryan had just picked me off from my own blog. I was writing my own blog at the time about Villa, and had a little message, asked me to come on and write for the website, which I did. I was doing that for a little while, and then somehow ended up putting my face on here. So it was like all a big
Do you
accumulation of my
know what
writing
though?
work.
I think my next point was going to be, how did you come onto the pod? Because I have said this story a lot of times, but everybody sort of asks whether they're new people or old, but whether they've been watching from the start or they've just started watching and now want to know how we all formed together. So I'll briefly explain it, and then I'll explain the story behind you. You might not even know this story, but basically, when I set this podcast up, I had a view for it to be like just a generic football phone in. People come on and they disperse. They come on and they disperse. And over time, as it grew and I liked certain people being on here, we formed this formidable partnership. And Justin and Ryan have been on since the very, very start. So they were on that first one, and then we formed the combination. And Justin, I used to work at Tony and Guy, and I used to go into Justin's shop. He owns a sort of baked potato shop, and you go in and get your lunch, and he puts whatever you want on the potato. And we generally talk for about 10 minutes every time I went in about the Villa. And then that's how our partnership was formed. And he'd always be on WM. And I thought, this guy talks sense. Ryan, I used to cut his hair in Tony and Guy, so we always used to talk about Villa for 45 minutes. And then Hannah came along, and I always remember with Ryan, like, we knew you were writing, and we were just like, we need to get her on the pod. We need to get her on the pod once to come on, and then we can keep getting her on the pod. And I always remember, like, I was just walking to work, and I was like, Ryan, have you asked her? Have you asked her to come on? And the one day he was just like, yeah, mate, she said she's going to come on. And then ever since, you've just been on here ever since. So that's how Hannah formed to come on the podcast, really. So, that's how you're here. But, you were writing for the website. That's how you technically started with Up the Villa podcast. And when Hannah does write an article, it is in GOAT status. But you've even been on a journey with the pod, really, because you came on at the start probably not expecting much, and then you've grown over time and you've got fans on the pod. You've got certain fans that absolutely love you on the pod. I think they probably want to replace you with me. But yeah, so you've got those fans, but then you've also now started to become a bit of a wanted theme with TNT, Talksport, BBC, WM, ITV News was your last one that you was on. So you've kind of got a bit of a back catalogue now of all of these appearances. So how do you find doing those appearances now?
It is wild because, like you say, when I first agreed to come on here, I probably thought, oh, it's like a one-off, just like a guest appearance, because I'd never done anything like this before. I'd always been the person like writing in the background, and that was my thing. And it still is to an extent, but I kind of realised that if I want to get anywhere in my life, I need to put myself out and like do something about it. So yeah, it just like developed and kept coming on, and then we had the group chat, and then it just, I feel like once
I
that
think
group
that
chat
was
initiated, it was like
once you get into that, I think you're in like bulletproof
yeah.
legendary status there. I mean this group chat and anything to do with Villa, and it's probably normally me because I've probably got more time on my hands than a lot of you. Normally putting you the update in there, and then I reckon we probably talk throughout the day in that chat. I think it's
No,
pretty
yeah.
much pretty
every
much
day.
a rolling chat and then moves on to the next one. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think when you got put into that,
that was
you
it.
were just there, weren't you?
Solidified, yeah, the voice notes. There've been some 6, 7-minute voice notes, yeah. And then, yeah, it just kept going, and I've really enjoyed it. I feel like, other people have commented that I seem more confident. I perhaps don't realise that, but I definitely think I probably am more confident now. And then when these, like, weird opportunities start coming up, the first, like, pinch me moment, it's so silly really because it was just a nomination, but when we got to go to the Football Content Awards last winter, that was just ridiculous to be in a room with all these other content creators. I was just like, "Wow, this is so cool." And then, yeah, this year it's been so amazing because to me it's like living a part of my dream, getting these opportunities to speak and to be the voice of our club in a lot of the ways, and I'm so grateful for it. Like every single time I kind of have to pinch myself, like they're asking me to do this. So I absolutely love it, and I think, and again, not to sort of play on this point all the time, but to see female content creators, specifically for Villa, because I feel like there are some big channels that have women for other clubs, but in the Aston Villa content space, I feel like it still is lacking. We need more of the girlies just to be here and to be speaking about football and just to be heard. And it's such a pleasure to be able to do that. And obviously grateful that this platform here, just sitting and talking from my bedroom, has enabled me to do that. So it's been such a whirlwind. I actually can't quite believe it's been basically 3 years now of doing this. It's just absolutely flown by, but I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah, it has been a very, very good journey. And I think it's just gonna snowball into something even bigger, probably. But I think it's inspiring. I think, you know, wherever you've got a platform and you can sort of inspire other people, I think that's something massive. And I think, you know, we get a lot of comments of, whether I think it was in sort of lockdown when, people were commenting saying, you've really got me through that. And I think that again is, we do an episode for 20 odd minutes and somebody's watched it and maybe we've made someone feel good. If Villa have won and we've put a smile on your face, then we've done our job. And even at the fan cams the other day, we had, 3 little kids coming on, and their memories of, like, I think it was Johan with his granddad. He's got that memory there forever now with his granddad. What, doing a fan cam, and maybe it might spur him on to be sort of like a content creator or want to be a pundit, or do you know what I mean? Like, so I think it's inspiring that whatever you do, you can have people that sort of do get inspired by it as well. So yeah, so I think it's been a good little episode chatting about Hannah and her life and how she became a Villa fan. But we'll end it on an even positive note then. Um, when fans look at Villa and fans have certain memories, it generally goes back to certain success or nostalgic memories. And, I cut someone's hair who was at the 1982 European Cup final. I mean, he's just got GOAT status anyway because he's seen Villa
Yeah,
in Rotterdam. He was in the stand, lift that trophy. You know, what a remarkable thing to see. But then other fans like yourself have probably never seen much success at all.
yeah.
So how are you feeling now about Aston Villa? Because even for me, I'm sort of 34. ONeal was a good memory, but I never really felt that connected to how I do now. And for me, it feels big, but for you, it must feel quite big because of what you've had to watch.
Definitely feels like almost a turning point, and it has done for probably the last year or so since Henry came in. We've had a few moments, probably since we got promoted, where we've thought we're hitting a turning point, and it's just not not happened, but it does feel different this time. It feels like we've finally got the pieces falling into place, and it's massive. I'm 23, nearly 24, so the success that's happened in my lifetime, I've not been, even conscious of. Not being there, been a baby, so it's amazing. I might have mentioned this in previous episodes, but it's like that those bragging rights of like, going into work. And I work with basically all Southerners, so a lot of their teams are London clubs, or basically none of them support Aston Villa. So when I can go into work and I can like puff my chest out and be like, yeah, that we won, we beat so and so at the weekend, or we're in the quarterfinal of this competition, or whatever I can say, it's like those bragging rights that we've never had, or I've never had. So it's it's so good. And I just think, for me, this year, like, I've had a lot of change in my personal life, like so many things that have been really difficult. And the one thing that was sort of I found constantly keeping me going was Villa. And it's so silly when you're not a football fan to look at people who talk about football in this way. But knowing I had this distraction, and at the time we were just winning every game, so it's brilliant. This this thing to just pour my energy in, even if we were losing, even if we were performing really badly, I could vent. It was just all this channel for emotion, and it's been so cathartic for me in this last like 6 9 months. And I can't wait to see sort of what the next 12 months even has to offer, and then beyond that, the sky's the limit. I think for Villa, I think this has to be it now. We deserve it, don't we? I think we
Yeah.
really deserve some good luck as Villa fans.
Yeah, it does feel like our time is coming, and it's just nice to see that Aston Villa are back. Looking at the table, and you go, "Oh, we're fifth, great," and not scroll, and just look at that mess at the bottom. But yeah, it's been great to have you on, Hannah. Great to chat. And get a better understanding of how you've got to this point now as a Villa fan. In the comment section down below, let me know who the next one is, Ryan or Justin. Who do you want next? And then that will be the next one that we can bring you. So cheers everyone for watching. Up the Villa.
Up the Villa.